Well, hello. Let's get
Hi.
started.
Okay.
This is the podcast, but without Lark, because Lark is super pregnant, and she will be back when she feels good. But Haley Paul here is a superstar because she's even more pregnant than Lark, and she came on the podcast.
Yeah.
From her own house.
From my own house.
Yeah. So I asked Haley if she would come on. I kind of wanted to find moms that I know who are in like different situations and then have little conversations with all of them and then maybe push it all together into one episode. But I'll let Haley tell about her situation, but I know that you are an attorney. She has one little boy who's 2?
He's 18 months. So
18 months. And she is very, very pregnant.
Very, very pregnant. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So do you work full-time, part-time, more than full-time?
Right now, I work part-time. I'm in the office 3 days a week, Tuesday through Thursday, and Monday and Fridays I try to work from home. But when you have a 18-month-old, it's really hard to work from home. Yeah. So I try to get most of my work done Tuesday through Thursday.
Is that how you want to keep your schedule forever, or do you think it's just till this baby gets a little bit bigger?
I want to go back full time. This part-time thing has been awesome in terms of having time with Henry, but being a litigator, my clients expect me to be there during the week, and so it's really hard managing client expectations doing part-time. So I think the reality of it is at some point, once I go back, I'm going to have to go back full time.
Yeah. This is
I don't mind it.
That's good. What kind of law do you practice?
So I do commercial litigation. We do all kinds of like contract disputes, torts. My specialty area is in employment law. So, and we mostly represent like the business side of things. So we're usually representing the employer. So if, there's charges of discrimination or if someone's breaching a non-compete, things like that, that's kind of my area of specialty right now. But I do all litigation, like whatever they need help with.
Yeah, that's cool. I like attorneys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty fun.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like we're like slimy bad guys. So.
No, I worked for I worked for a collections attorney, and he was so sweet and such a good person. And then I worked at a little law firm that had I think 6 or 7 attorneys, and I loved all of them too. Yeah. And now I work in the revenue and tax division at the Attorney General, and so I don't know. I like attorneys because they're smart. First of all, I'm sure there are idiots out there, but I haven't met one yet. Yeah,
there's probably idiots in every profession.
I feel like attorneys, because they have to deal with sometimes either like the worst of the public or also people in really stressful situations. They learn how to be diplomatic, but they also do get their souls a little bit like beat down into sarcasm. And so I like that mix.
Yeah, it's definitely true. I mean, we get to see the worst of people, and that part's hard.
Yeah. Have you had to do any like business disputes that are actually family disputes?
Yes. Like in the case that I took most personally in my career so far has been one of those issues. Where it was a mother and daughter that the mother had sold her company to her daughter, and it turned into a huge nightmare.
That's so sad.
And like I still keep up with that client. We still have lunch every once in a while.
Yeah.
They still aren't talking, and it was just like that one. That was a hard case.
Did it make you like call your mom every night? Like, Mom, I just want you to know I love you.
Like, I would never do this to you.
Don't ever sell me a business. Yeah. Okay. Well, I want Haley to talk about mom stuff, so I should probably make her talk about mom stuff. And I had my questions printed out, but then I lost them. So I have to read them off my tiny phone, and I don't have my glasses on. Okay. Have you seen parenthood change your personalities in ways that surprised you that you didn't know would happen?
Yes and no. I think maybe what parenthood did is it probably took some personality traits that maybe were there all along, but really just made them a lot stronger, a lot more noticeable. I'm a worrier by nature. And, I mean, that was even pre-kids, but I think, being a mom, it just took it up to a whole new level.
Oh, no. Yeah.
I think every mom, every parent probably worries about their kids. And so I think if you're already kind of an anxious person, it just amplifies it.
Yeah. No, I think probably worrying that is a big part of motherhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
silly stuff, things that I never thought about. I mean, I hope this isn't gross, but I worry about his bowel movements. I'm like, oh my gosh, he has pooped in
you have to
a day.
There's no one else to worry about it.
I know. It's so just stuff that I never thought I would worry about. And that's, yeah. So I'd say it definitely, I don't know that it changed my personality, but I think it maybe brought out some things that were already there and made them stronger.
You know what surprised me about my personality once I had kids was that I am a lot less patient with them than I thought I was going to be. Because I'm naturally a pretty tolerant, patient person. But there's just so much of your life is herding cats.
Yes.
Once you have children. And mine are a little older because I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. So to me, they're to the point where sometimes I'm pissed off because I'm just like, okay, the time of your life where you're allowed to be this much of an inconvenience to me, you shouldn't be this hard to deal with anymore. So, yeah, I'm a lot less patient.
I know. I'm a little worried, especially having baby number 2 come along, because, when you're tired, especially, brings out a little more impatience, I think. And so it's one of those things that Zach and I have been talking about. We need to keep each other accountable. And when we feel like we're losing our temper with Henry, we need to remind each other, okay, we're just tired.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes you have to remind yourself too, they're not being bad. They're being kids.
Yeah.
And sometimes kids are bad, but they're kids. Let's see. Can you think of anything that being a mother has taught you that you didn't expect to learn other than about little boy bowel movement?
Yeah. I think it teaches you, and then this probably sounds corny and cliche, but to love in a completely different way. I love Henry in a different way than I love my mom, in a different way than I love Zach. And I don't know, part of it maybe comes from the overwhelming sense of responsibility that I have. I know he can't take care of himself. He depends on us. And with the love there, it was automatic. I mean, from the very beginning. And even when he was getting us up and we were getting maybe 30 minutes of sleep at a time those first few weeks, I mean, even being exhausted, there was still that it's love. And I don't know if that's something that you're taught or if it just comes natural, but it wasn't something I expected. I mean, even though people tell you about it, it's just until you've experienced it, you can't describe it.
Yeah. Sometimes Gabe actually will even get irritated with me because he'll say you only care about the kids and you don't care about me, because he knows I am always preoccupied with the girls, always. No matter what I'm doing, part of my brain is thinking about what do they need next? Do I have everything in order for tomorrow? But that's how I try to explain it to him, is that I don't love the girls more than you, but I'm always going to devote more time to taking care of them because they need it. Nobody else needs me like they need me. So, yeah.
Exactly. Zach can make himself a sandwich. Henry can't.
He can, but will he? I mean, I don't know. That's fine. Do you feel like motherhood has taught you certain lessons and fatherhood has taught Zach different lessons, and that there's any big difference between the two roles?
I think the lessons are probably similar. The lessons that you're learning, you have to, parenthood, whether you're the mother or the father, requires patience. But I think that Zach feels more of an overwhelming sense to, like, he's got to provide for the family and he's got to make sure everything is taken care of, on a grand level. I don't think about those sort of things as much. I'm more like the day-to-day are his basic needs being met? And so I'm guessing that the lessons that we're learning are probably similar, but there's probably nuances, things that he's learning that I'm not. I think parenthood, whether you're the mother or the father, you have to learn to let go of a few things.
Yeah.
Learn to compromise with your spouse on how you're parenting. So I think in that sense, there's probably lessons that we're both learning, but there probably are things that he sees that I don't, and vice versa.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so small. I mean, obviously probably it's such a strange question that maybe you could tell this is like one of my little like pet issues that I think about sometimes. Do you think motherhood is praised too much or not enough? Do you think that people take it for granted, or do you think people put it on a crazy pedestal? Because obviously I kind of think people put it on a crazy pedestal and that they make too big of a deal out of it. But
that's sort of a loaded question, so I should probably be careful how I answer it. I think that in some realms it's praised too highly, and then in some realms maybe not enough. For example, in the church, I feel like sometimes
that's where I need to go with this conversation.
I feel like sometimes in the church it's maybe praised too highly, and I think there's a danger in that, because there are couples out there who can't get pregnant, and if you're preaching motherhood is the highest calling of a woman, which I've heard preachers say that.
Well, Paul kind of said it. Yeah.
But if you say that, it kind of diminishes the value of women who, for whatever reason, can't get pregnant, or maybe they're not married, or maybe they decide they don't want kids, which I don't think is inherently wrong. So I just think you diminish the value of women if that's what if we just focus on how great, motherhood is and how important it is. And not to say that it's not important, but I think if that's all the value that we place on women, then it's going to be discouraging to a number of women in the church.
Yeah.
And then I think in the world, there's times where parenthood in general is devalued, and people see kids as a nuisance and an inconvenience. So I think, it just depends what we're talking about. I think there are areas where we need to value motherhood more, and then I think there are places where maybe, not to say we should value it less, but maybe step back and say this isn't the only way
or at least value not being a mother.
Yes, value other contributions and other attributes of womanhood.
Do you want to hear my beef with it?
Sure.
Because the two reasons that I actually do think that motherhood is praised too highly in the church, and this isn't just in the church. Okay, like Mother's Day, I know I'm a brat, but Mother's Day always kind of irritates me, because sometimes I get the feeling that all the dads out there who pretty much just let the moms do all of the housework and they feel like it's okay if I make her do the work as long as I praise her for it a lot.
Yeah.
But I always think of the verse, to obey is better than sacrifice. Like, we don't want you to bring us flowers. We want you to do the laundry.
Right.
Yeah. So sometimes I feel like people praise motherhood and pray, we appreciate all your hard work, and we're saying this to get us off the hook so we can keep making you do all the hard work.
I totally agree with that. Yeah, no.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I think is weird about it, specifically in church, is that I feel like there's just a little bit of a lack of bluntness, and I personally really enjoy bluntness. So sometimes I feel like almost in the same sermon, they'll talk about how like God set up men and fathers to be like our spiritual role models and the spiritual head of the household. But then they'll talk about how like mothers provide like all the compassion and all the prayer and all this stuff. And I'm like, guys, like, I mean, it's good that you want to encourage people, but like let's just be honest, like women are more likely to like give a care whether they have the Holy Spirit or not, because men are just going to make their own decisions and they're not going to worry about it. Like,
Yeah.
and it's okay that that's how it is, but when they start praising like women's spiritual contribution, something about it always just kind of irks me, because it's almost like they're admitting that women usually are the main spiritual teacher without admitting that women are the main.
Yeah.
Oh, did you feel like there was an expectation from the other people like in your family or in your life that like once you had kids, do you think people expected you to work part-time or quit working, or do you think those days are all in the past and everybody understands that?
I don't think anyone expected anything from me, and certainly if they did, they didn't voice that.
Yeah.
I had, they anticipated that my priorities would change.
Mm-hmm.
Just knowing me better than I guess me knowing myself. In particular, my cousin April has kids that are several years older than Henry. And she had been an accountant before, and I don't think she was as career focused as I was, but she saw her priorities change, and she actually stays at home full time with them. And I don't think she necessarily expected me to stay home full time, but she definitely warned me beforehand. She was like, I know you're saying you're going to go back to work full time and you're going to be on the partner track. And, I just want you to, manage your expectations, have realistic, expectations for yourself and that sort of thing. So I think some of my family members like knew me a little bit better than I knew myself, but it wasn't an expectation and it wasn't like pushing me towards something.
I feel like most people at this point understand too that for most families to make it financially, both parents are just they're gonna work. Yeah. That golden age of only one person having to work, or for most of us over. Yeah.
And honestly, I mean, I still want to work. I just didn't want to work 80 hours a week.
Yeah.
I didn't. And the big firm was great. I made really good money. But I felt like in some ways I was like selling my soul. I mean, it was stressful. It just felt like nothing was ever enough. And I couldn't have maintained that and taking care of my son. Like, I feel like to your question earlier, I feel like if I had stayed in that environment, he definitely wouldn't have gotten the best of me. He wouldn't even have gotten like 20% of me, I don't think. So
Yeah.
yeah.
There was a time when we had just moved into a new house. This was a while ago, and Dixie was still pretty little. She's probably 2. And I remember there was one night where like it hit me, the fact that I spend like a total of maybe 3 hours a day with my kids.
Yeah.
And I was by myself in my room, and I started crying and like flipping out, because I was like, oh, like I have these beautiful creatures and I hardly see them. And then it's funny because I like I was praying like, God, like I don't know if this is okay. I don't know if this is healthy. I don't know if I'm making a mistake. How can I tell? And then like 2 months later, Gabe got a job to where he told me like, you don't have to work if you don't want to. And so then I had to make a decision. I was like, oh, like I can stay home if I want to. But then in the end, like I decided to go back to work anyway. I got a different job, but I still work and just like the other day I was driving home and I was thinking about like those 2 moments, and I was asking myself, like as I'm like in like stop and go traffic in Lansing, like where a 45-minute drive takes me an hour, you know, because everybody leaves work at once. I was like asking myself, like, did I make the right choice? I don't know if I did. You know, every time I have to like answer the phone and talk to like a crazy person who's like yelling that their cigarettes cost too much money, like weird stuff. I always think like, did I make the right choice? But I like working. I like being around people.
Yeah, and I think it's honestly good for your girls to see you in that role. And I know, like, watching my mom like work as hard as she did, it taught me a work ethic. And I want my kids to see that. And I know they're going to get it from Zach too, but I also want them to see it in me. Maybe that's selfish, but I mean, I want them to be proud of both of us and like what we do.
You know, maybe sometimes I'm afraid I'm going to give my kids like a phobia, especially Evie, because she like tends to be a little bit nervous anyway. You know, I learned so many good lessons from growing up with money problems, growing up with like hardly any money. And like we're not rich, but we don't struggle the way like my mom did. And so I'm constantly telling Evie like how lucky she is and how I never got to do any of this stuff. And so she will tell, like, she like, I can tell she's hearing me, because she will be like, I wish you didn't have to go to work, but we need the money. And sometimes she'll ask me, what was it like to be poor, Mom? And I'm like, it was rough. It was really rough. One of my other questions is, once you had kids, do you feel like people expected you to just teach the standard lessons about Jesus and God and the Bible, whether or not you believed them in that like traditional way? Do you think there's an expectation that we're all going to teach kids the same thing and not stray away from like what we're supposed to teach them, no matter what we believe ourselves?
Yeah, you know, I would say yes. I mean, I don't know that like there's spoken expectations or if it's more like it's just something you feel. I do remember like we kind of kept Henry out of church for the first couple of months until he had his vaccines, because I was that paranoid mom. And I remember kind of catching some flack from people like, when are you going to bring him to church? When are you going to start bringing him? I guarantee my like 2-month-old isn't missing anything. Like he's not spiritually doomed for the rest of his life. He doesn't come to church at 2 months old. I mean, even now when we bring him, he screams, he likes to like yell at the pastor, like talk back to him and stuff. And so, I mean, half the time we end up having to take him to the nursery anyway. So I'm like, even now, I'm pretty sure he's not getting that much out of the lessons. So I think there is an expectation, and I don't think people really ask parents anymore. There's certainly not any kind of mentoring that happens at our church that I know of like parents and, you know, how do you feel about this? And what are you teaching your kids about this? And like, there's nothing like that. No one's having those conversations. And so I think in that way, there is probably just this unspoken expectation of, you know, you're teaching your kids everything that the church teaches. And whether or not you agree with it or whether or not you have doubts about certain things. So, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, I think.
No, it does.
There is an expectation there.
Do you know who Ricky Gervais is?
No, is that going to be embarrassing?
No, I don't know. He's a British comedian. He I think created, and he also starred in like the British version of The Office. And
okay, yes, I know who he is. I just didn't know by name.
Yeah. Well, he's an atheist, and I heard him one time talking about. He was telling the story of when he knew he didn't believe in God, and he was raised going to church and had like the standard, whatever standard British Christian upbringing there is. But anyways, you know, he was told all these stories about the Bible, and he had an older brother, and he said one time his older brother came home and was talking to him, and they somehow were talking about God, and his older brother said like, you know, none of that stuff is true. And his mother snapped at his brother and said, don't say that, you know. And he said, see, it was seeing his mother's reaction that like really took it home, like made him feel like, oh, like it's not, there's no God. Like the fact that she was so, like, was so protective over his brother even saying that to him. He was like, oh, like that's what made him think like, oh, there is no. So sometimes I try to take it easy on the girls at this point because they're kids and kids can't understand everything that grown-ups can understand. But after hearing that story, I try really hard not to give the girls some standard line if I don't think it's true, because they'll sense it. That's what I always think. Like, it's bad to teach your kids something's true if you don't think it is, because they're gonna sense that you're lying, and then they're just not gonna trust anything. Yeah.
And I think it's all what's age appropriate. I want to be the kind of parent that has like really open and honest discussions with my kid. My mom really tried hard with us girls doing that. But even at that was so different from how she was raised that, you know, she went this far, you know, but there were still topics that she didn't really want to cover, you know. I really want to have, you know, open, honest discussions with my kids. What, you know, here are the things that I question. What are the things that you question? Without judgment, you know, and it's hard as a parent. And, you know, it's great for me to say that now that I have an 18-year-old who's not going to ask me any hard questions. We'll see when they're teenagers. But because there's questions that I have right now that I haven't figured out the answer to.
Yeah.
And, and if they come to me asking, you know, why does God let, you know, bad things happen to good people, I don't have an answer for that. So, you know, if they figure it out before me, maybe they can fill me in. So, I want that honesty with them, and I'm not just going to feed them a line. And when they come to me with doubts and with questions, I'm not going to feed them the line, well, you just need to pray about it more. You just need, you know, you need to read your Bible more, which I feel like that's kind of a standard answer we get in church, which I don't find super helpful. If, you know, if I'm having doubts and insecurities in my faith, going to the Bible and just trying to read through it, trying to find some answer, that's never felt helpful to me.
and the you just need to pray about it more. I mean, we all do. We all need to pray about everything more.
Yeah.
When they say that, sometimes they're putting the like fault on you. Like,
yeah. Right.
Yeah. Oh, well, you have doubts. Well, you just need to pray and ask God to fix them. And then if they don't get fixed, well, it was your fault. Like,
yeah.
Like
you should have faith.
Yeah, that's not helpful. Like, oh, well, you're just a bad person. Some people are just destined for hell.
Yeah, then you feel like a terrible Christian. Okay, well.
yeah, that's not helpful. I try to, as far as like the age appropriate thing, because that is the hardest thing, I think. So I try to answer questions like as they come, because I can't always tell what the girls are ready for. So sometimes I figure like, well, Evie's questions will show me what she's ready for. And sometimes she asks me some questions.
Oh, yeah.
But I love it. And I love the fact that she'll actually think about religion. She asked me maybe a month ago, she was like, Mom, do people who go to churches other than us, like, do they really believe in God? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, well, does God care that they go to other churches? And I was like, well, I don't think so, but not everyone agrees with me. And she was like, yeah, I don't think he cares either. And I'm like, yeah, that's all right. You might change your mind when you're older. She's like, okay.
Yeah, it says age appropriate. And that's like where I kind of worry myself a little bit, because my niece Ava, I mean, since she was little, she's very inquisitive. And so there's been times she asked me things. I remember on our way to church one Saturday, I don't even know why I was with them. But she was asking me, you know, where did Aunt Sue's daddy go when he died? And I'm like, oh, well, you know, I'm like, April, like how can you do this? And so I'm like, well, he's sleeping in Jesus, and but he's gonna come back someday when Jesus comes back. And then oh my gosh, that opened a huge can of worms, and I realized, okay, that probably wasn't the best way to approach this. And I think April was driving and looking at me in the rear view like, what are you doing? Because then she goes into her like Sabbath school class and is like, hey everyone, whenever Jesus comes back, Aunt Sue's daddy is going to be alive again. And I'm like, okay, well, this is great.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's so bad. Do you know?
No.
Evie, I'm trying to remember how this went. We were talking about when Jesus comes back one time, and she asked me, if he comes back while I'm still little, will I stay little or will I grow up? And I said, well, I don't really know, but however you end up staying, it's going to be however you would be happiest. And I said, besides, like, age isn't really going to mean anything anymore. I was like, the only reason age means something right now is because we die and we count our age to see how close we are to getting old. Yeah. I was like, once you get old, your age won't matter. And she started crying so hard. And she was like, will we have birthday parties?
Yeah.
I was like, probably not. And that's why she was crying, was because she found out when Jesus comes back, we probably won't have birthday parties. And I tried to tell her, like, Evie, that doesn't mean we can't have parties. She's like, it's not the same. I was like, oh my gosh, like, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to know. Kids, like, what's right, what's wrong? How should I answer this?
Yeah, and sometimes I can't tell what's gonna upset them. Yeah. Like I didn't know I was gearing her up for like a total breakdown over birthday parties. I just thought it would. Now she probably doesn't want God to fix the earth because she just wants to have her birthday party and just let everyone else die in sin so she can. I don't know.
It's funny, like from a perspective of a child, like that's a legit concern. I also remember, like as a teenager, thinking, "Oh, I don't want Jesus to come back before I've like gotten married and had kids and gotten to experience life." But then it's so silly looking back now. I'm like, wow, like that's missing a huge.
Now you're like, this wasn't so great. I could have skipped this. Hi.
Hey.
I didn't even print the questions this time, but I think I'll remember them.
That's good.
Actually, I still have them because I made this mistake when I talked with Haley about like pretty much the same things. And when I was talking to her, I was like, I printed the questions, but I don't know where I put my sheet of paper, so I have to read them off my phone without my glasses. So like every new question, I'd be like, okay, just a second. How do you feel about But I think I know what I asked you. But I will have it here. So if I do this a little bit, it's because I don't have the glasses. But hi, thank you so much for talking to me. I'm excited.
Yeah,
I should have asked you.
I was nervous. I wasn't. And then Brian's like, it's not like you're going to be on YouTube. And I said, actually, that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, I would never do that. And I'm like, great, now I'm nervous.
He was like, oh, maybe you should rethink this. This might not be a good idea. Hello, Internet. This is my best childhood friend, Erin Petrotta, right?
Yeah, good job.
Okay, good. Because, in my heart, it's Erin Stacy. But that's okay. So we're going to talk about, questions pretty much all about motherhood. So first, why don't you kind of explain like your situation, like with kids and work and all that sort of stuff.
I am married 7 years next week, and we have 2 little boys. We have a 3.5-year-old, and we have a just turned 1-year-old, and they're both boys. And currently I'm staying at home and doing the mom job all day long.
Do you like staying at home?
I miss working.
Yeah.
This period of time when they're really young, I like being at home because, I don't know, they basically seem to need something every hour of every day. So it's there. But at the same time, I am thinking about maybe in like another year when they're a little bit more self-sufficient, going back for a couple days a week. So.
Yeah. I honestly think that working part-time, if if you can swing it, like that is like the dream life for me. Yeah. I work full time right now, and at least around here, it's hard to find jobs that are part time that, like, I don't know, they don't want to pay you like hardly anything unless you're there all the time. But part time to me would be like the best. Okay, should we just jump into the like real questions?
Sure.
Okay. Do you? Oh no. Oh, okay. Sorry, I almost closed it on my phone. And once again, internet, I'm sorry. I'm reading the questions off my phone without my glasses. You would have thought I would have learned, but I didn't learn. Do you feel like parenthood has changed your personality in ways that you didn't expect it to?
Yes. Probably mostly. You might laugh at this one actually, but I feel like I'm more of an introvert now.
I am laughing.
I'm laughing because I know that when we were kids, you know, I was like all over the place, had to talk to everybody and be in everybody's business all the time. And now I'm like, I just want to stay at home and like leave my pajamas on. And I feel like if I have like one thing going on for the day, like one event or something we have to go to, I feel so overwhelmed. Like, oh my goodness, we're so busy. It's like one thing, you know? And, or somebody will call me up and say like, oh, we should get together. Let's go to the park with our kids. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I've got to like get the kids out the door. And you know, I think that just like, I don't know, I've just become like this little introvert that likes to stay at home. I love having people over though. So if people like want to come over and hang out in my crazy, you know, house with toys everywhere, then I'm good with that. But so that was like my biggest thing. I think other than that, it's just more revealed how I probably have always been, like impatient and selfish. You know, this way of like making you see your humanity, I think. So but that I don't think is really a huge change. I think it was just easier for me to cover up before. So.
I don't feel too bad about it when they expose my human, and they only expose it because they test it. Like, I was just saying at work today, I was telling them about how grumpy Evie is when she wakes up, and one of the girls was like, that just surprises me because you're like the nicest person. And I was like, I'm not as nice to my children. And she was like, oh, and I was like, because they piss you off. Like, they don't listen. Yeah.
They definitely can drive me to the edge of myself like every single day. I remember before I had kids thinking like, what is wrong with these people? Why are they arguing with a 2-year-old? And now I'm like, why am I arguing with my 3-year-old?
Oh man. Do you feel like the lessons and changes you've experienced from motherhood are different than what your husband has experienced as a father?
Yeah. He is like totally completely opposite personality of me. And that's probably a really good, really calm. He's really patient. He's always grateful. Always looks at like the positive side of things. And I am just not that way. And so I think it affects both of us very, very differently. And a lot of times he's looking at me like, why is this such a big deal for you? And but I think it's probably for the best because then he balances me out and he's like, you know, can chill me out and calm me down and remind me that it's really not a big deal, or you know. But I think was the actual like birth like a big experience for you, or like did you feel like you took away like a lot of significant lessons just from that, or was it kind of like, oh, just this thing I did and then the rest of our lives happened? No, I think both of the boys' births were pretty significant. I think this is going to sound terrible, and here I am saying it on the internet for everybody to hold on to forever, but that was like the part of the whole experience that I was like, this is amazing, like I want to do this again. Then like the growing up years, like the like little kids every single day, I'm like, oh, I don't think I can handle more than 2. How do people do this? So I had heard before that people, you know, some women were like all about like the baby's stage, like that early infant, you know, brain baby stage. So they kept wanting to have babies and more babies because they love the little baby stage. And then, you know, turns out they've got 10 kids later. So, and I never could really, but definitely with, I don't know, the birth experience, I guess, I don't know, that part's like the exciting, fun part. That sounds terrible. I know women are like, probably like, think I'm crazy, but I had really good birth experiences. So I just thought it was kind of a wild, crazy ride. And, but I don't really know where the question was now.
Well, I guess, and like, it doesn't feel like a random question to me just because there were things about childbirth that I felt lucky to be the mom in those two experiences, because I was like, there were things, and I remember my grandma kept telling me, when you have that baby, you're gonna have a love in your heart that you didn't know was there. And I know a lot of women do have those like endorphin rushes where they do feel like this wave of love, and I didn't have any of that. Like my emotions weren't affected, but just I felt like there were like spiritual lessons. Like you just understand like the pain that is necessary for like life to continue on in the world. And I was like, oh man, I'm having all these like huge like philosophical lessons just like shoved into my head. And I felt lucky that I was the one that got to experience those things, because I don't think like as an onlooker, I just don't think that Gabe could get the same lessons. I think from parenthood, he can get the exact same lessons as me. The reason, like you said, the reason we learn different things is because we have different personalities. But the birth to me is the one part of parenthood that like moms just get to learn, and like fathers, they can, no matter how much they are observing. At least for me and Gabe, there were things about it that like he just didn't get to understand, I guess. Yeah.
I think it's probably the most alive I ever feel at one moment, you know?
Yeah.
Is definitely in the middle of the labor, especially the end part of labor.
Yeah.
Very surreal. I in some ways I wish memories and feelings and things like that were like that you could just, I don't know, kind of like bottle them up and kind of hang on to them, because I'd like to back and reflect it without going through it again, just to be able to like, I could think about the memories, but to actually like hold those experiences. But it is kind of a little bit of a buzz that lasts for at least a couple weeks, I think.
It would be kind of nice if you could bottle that experience somehow, because mostly for me, because I was so exhausted that I know a lot of the like thoughts I was having, a lot of the feelings I was having, like once I went to sleep and woke up, I had already, like the memory was already way dulled because I was just too tired when it was happening.
And now you've got this infant that's completely dependent on you, and you've got to, move into the next.
Yeah.
Oh, like immediately, there's not a whole lot of time to sit and reflect.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so the second one, because then you have an older child that needs you too. So.
Yeah. And you guys lived in Lodi when you had, I know Logan is your oldest one. I don't even know your younger boy's name.
Logan in Fresno, and then we had Milo here in Lodi, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. But so you guys have never moved out of California. You've been in California the whole time, right? Yeah, you just were in different cities. Okay. The next question, do you feel like motherhood is either not appreciated enough or like overly celebrated? And this question is mostly for me, like in church and the way that motherhood is talked in church. Do you think it's ever like pushed to like one side or the other too much?
I couldn't really speak, for the body of Christ as a whole, but congregationally, local congregation. Yeah. I feel, I don't know, it's probably somewhere in between, because sometimes I feel, there's some people who are super appreciative and they tell me often, and, they make me feel appreciated by their words or actions. And then sometimes I feel like either people who have never had kids before, or men who aren't moms, or moms who have, their children are grown and old. Sometimes I feel like they forget, or they just don't know how hard it can be to be a mom. So then some of the comments or expectations that they might have that's what makes me feel like not so much underappreciated, but like more stressed out, I guess. But I feel like that's probably more just forgetting and not remembering. I don't know. So I don't know, but I probably put the most stress on myself anyways. I don't really spend that much time thinking about it. I don't really have time to think about it, honestly. Especially at church, I'm trying to keep my kids quiet. And
oh man, that gets better. That does get better, because I can remember when both of them were infants, there were times where, and so like your older, he's like 1, so he's almost out of probably like the worst time. But there were times where I wondered, like, why do we come to church? Because like we would come to church so that I could, like, me and Gabe, or at least one of us could sit in the nursery for like pretty much the entire sermon. And I'm like, why are we waking up early on the weekends, like, to sit in the nursery?
Right.
Yeah.
we started keeping our oldest in church when he was 2.
Mhm.
Mostly because I didn't want to. We can keep them in the nursery till they're 4, but till they turn 4. But then I thought, well, that's going to be ridiculous to all of a sudden at 4 be like, you can't come in here and play anymore.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
thought we'd slowly train them over time, and it worked for a while. And sometimes it works, but they also put a TV out in the foyer, which is great because then if
Oh,
the kids, I can still hear the sermon.
that is nice.
A little bit better. But I actually currently I'm singing on 2 different worship teams, and so that's difficult because if I'm on stage, then I can't be with the kids and help, and then Logan wants to be up there singing with me, and I'm trying to explain why he can't be up there dancing.
Uh-huh.
So, there's just different little struggles or things, or just wanting to be involved and wanting to grow your kids and teach your kids about what it means to not just like show up at church, but be involved in church and
Yeah.
but there's growing pains, I guess, involved in that, and it's a little bit at a time. So it's just nice when people appreciate or they realize like that it is a struggle and it's difficult and you're doing the best you can, and they're like just really loving and appreciative, and they don't get mad at you because your kid's making doesn't know how to whisper.
That's okay. The old men in our church don't know how to whisper either.
Yeah, there you go. So
It's pretty good when old people think they're whispering and they're saying, "What did he say?
Huh?
What book is he in?
yeah.
What verse?" And you're like, "Oh my gosh," you feel like yelling it to them like from the back of the church. Like, yeah, anyways. Okay. Actually, when I was the day I was like typing up your questions, I just happened to be reading this part of Genesis, and I was like, "Oh, I like that. I'm gonna put it in the questions." But there's a place in Genesis where they, it's when Joseph's brothers don't realize it's Joseph who's in Egypt selling them grain, and he says, I won't let whichever one stayed, Judah maybe, Levi maybe, whoever stayed. He's like, I won't let him go home unless you bring Benjamin back. So they go and tell their dad, like, we have to take Benjamin with us. And it's like Joseph says, like, no, you can't take him because if he dies, I'll die. And so it said like the phrase. Let me read the phrase is that Judah tells Joseph that like Jacob's life is bound up in the life of Benjamin. Like his life is bound up in the life of his child. And I loved the phrase. I was like, I think sometimes Gabe has trouble understanding and also gets irritated with me for like just the constant worry, and not even about anything specific, but just the worry I have for my kids. But the best way I've explained it to some of my friends who don't have kids, it's like, I can't feel okay if I don't think my kids are okay. It's just impossible. If I think my kids aren't all right, then I can't feel all right. So I just loved that phrase, like that his life was bound up with the life of his kids. Do you ever feel that way too?
Yeah, and I think that is motherhood. I think, I think motherhood is like feeling so many different emotions and feelings all at the exact same time, and they're not really conflicting with each other. They're just there all the time, multiple feelings. And you just kind of have to learn to balance it and deal with them. And worry and anxiety and those kinds of feelings are, so often, Brian will tell me, like, why are you worrying, or stop worrying? And sometimes I try to use other words like concern. It's like, it is an active, you're constantly always thinking about your kids. And even when, we go out, just the 2 of us without our kids, or we haven't had a night without the baby yet with us, but when we would send Logan over to my parents' house and we would have a night alone off of parenting, you're always thinking about your kid. Your kid is always in your mind. The little text message updates, because it's like, I think I heard one time it was something about like your heart living outside your body. That's what it's like to have kids, and it's completely true. A friend of a friend, her son I haven't heard the update yet, but he had like 8 hours heart surgery today, and he's really close to Logan's age. And I don't even know them, never met them, but I've heard about them, and just reading the little update of her saying goodbye to her kid, I like burst into tears this morning, because it's just that, and I'm not even an emotional person usually, but it's just that feeling of like complete helplessness when it comes to your kid. Though I think that's what God asks us to trust him with, but it's not that he's completely in control, and come what may, it's not on us, and whatever worrying we do, it doesn't get us anywhere. But I think still being a mother, you can't help it.
Yeah,
they're just a part of you. I don't know.
And I don't know if this is like if this is natural or if this is just the way our culture has gotten, but I know that Gabe isn't as conscious of like the girls as I am. He's just,
Right.
you know, for him it's more of like they'll be fine, like, and they need to learn to fend for themselves. And sometimes he will say stuff like to me too, like why can't, like you said, like why can't you turn it off? Why can't you spend time just with me? And why don't you worry about me? Like why do you only worry about them? And it's like because they're the only two humans who depend on me. Like nobody else actually needs me. Like they're the only two people that I consider. There are lots of people I want to help, lots of people I want to be there for, but I expect everybody else to fend for themselves except for my kids. They're the only people that I'm like, no, I understand. Like I have to be there. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if it is a cultural thing or if that's a natural woman thing. At this point you probably can't tell because both are just way too entrenched. Yeah. But it does seem to be typical. Not all the time true. I think it's probably more typical of women than men.
Yeah, but like I can tell when he has to go to the bathroom. And Brian, how did you know? Like, or we have something in their mouth and he'll be like, how did you know that was, you know, how did you, I don't know. There's just these little things, you know, that I can sense or I just know about my kids. And I don't know. It's not really, I mean, is that a superpower, knowing when your kid has to pee? I don't know. Usually the damn day, and I don't know how he misses some of it, but you know.
You're like, he's doing the dance. What do you think? You think he's just, yeah. Anyway, do you ever, and this one to me is like a pretty interesting question. Once you had kids, did you feel like it was just expected of you that you were going to teach your kids certain things about God and Jesus and teach the kids about God and Jesus in certain ways? Like, no matter what you actually believe, do you think people expect you to kind of like just keep all of those like borderline or troublesome beliefs or doubts to yourself and like just teach the kids exactly what, you know, no matter what you believe, just teach them what we've all agreed is the right way to teach kids?
I don't know. I don't think I've ever personally felt that way.
That's good.
I'm just really stubborn and kind of, even maybe I'm not even aware that maybe people do have those expectations. I think, you know, David made it really clear in the Psalms that you can come to God with all of your feelings, your doubt, your anger, all of those kinds of feelings. And I want my children to be able to do that too. And so I don't really want to sugarcoat relationship with God. I don't want it to be like something where you have to be really careful and dance around it and you know, like he's kind of this untouchable God in the sky, you know, that we kind of talk about, and he's our creator, but we don't really have a relationship with. I was listening to an interview with Sean McDowell, which is Josh McDowell's son, and he was saying that when he was a teenager, he was starting to have some doubts about his faith, and he was really worried to talk to his dad about it because his dad had written all these books about becoming a Christian and the historical evidence and everything. And so when he talked to his dad about it and said, hey, I've got all these doubts, his dad was like, good, which was not the response he was thinking he was going to get. And his dad said, like, awesome, let's dive in here. Let's look at these. Let's, put your doubts before God, because truth is truth. And if you really truly believe that it's true, which of course we do, then you're going to come back to, the truth of Jesus Christ. So I think that that's true when raising your kids too. Of course, I'm going to teach them what I believe.
Yeah.
And hopefully I won't really be afraid. There's probably going to be a time when they doubt or when they don't know or they have questions. And hopefully I'll be able to be strong enough in my faith that I don't like crumble under that. But knowing that that's probably inevitable, I don't know. Personally, I really just hope that I can help direct them back to, seeking truth above all else. And, forget everybody else. I don't know. Too many other expectations, but I don't really think a lot to them. So, and I kind of do my own thing anyways. And I think I've always been a little bit of a rebel. And so if I think then part of me is kind of like, hey, guess what? I don't think like you do, but not into. So, and waves.
I don't really like the idea of teaching my kids like little by little, and so kind of like skirting around what I actually think is true. But sometimes I have learned that like sometimes there's just no other good way to do. And like, at least for me personally, like clean and unclean is one of those things, because I don't personally think you have to keep clean and unclean, but I do. Like, we keep it and our family keeps it. And so I'm like, it's not like I'm going to lie to my kids when they're old, like when they're older and they ask me like, Mom, like, do you think we need to? I'm going to be like, do I think you need to? No, I don't think you need to. But like at this point, I couldn't find a good way to explain to a toddler, like, this is something that we do. We use it as a tool. We use it as a way to teach you about purity and about obedience. So you have to do this, but not because you have to do this, just because mommy says you have to do this. And then later, I was like, how do you explain that to a toddler? So the toddler, I just told her, like, we don't eat these things. It's because God asked them not to in the Bible. And that's like, and so I am kind of hoping that someday when Evie is like, Mom, that when I tell her, like, no, I don't think, that she isn't like, you lied to me. Like,
and I remember having those conversations with my parents, specifically my dad, when I was older, though, like high school, and I would come to him, somebody probably came to me and said, hey, what about this? And so I went to him about this, and then we had good discussions about it. I don't think I ever felt really like lied to per se, but it was good conversations to have, and it was a change where I personally was seeking out, the Bible for wisdom and knowledge on my own, apart from taught me. So I think, with little kids, their faith, there's going to be a point where their faith becomes their own, and faith in our understanding all the time. And so I could next year have come deeper into my faith and realize that something that I believe now isn't necessarily true. Fortunately, now there's a YouTube video out there that's gonna, timestamp my thoughts.
Oh my goodness! Listen, if you're that worried about it, seriously, like 30 people are gonna watch this. Like, that's a top. Like, that's okay. The weirdest story to me, the way that we teach Bible stories, and so I do a lot of this stuff with like the children's church at our church, and I usually try, even if I can't present the facts, the like blunt facts of a story, I try to explain what I think the point of those blunt facts are. So like, we're not going to talk about Judah having sex with his daughter-in-law when he thought she was a prostitute. Like, we're just not going to talk about that story, but like, I do try to at least explain like the point. But the one story to me that is so weird, the way we teach it to kids, is Noah's Ark. Because we love to do Noah's Ark with the kids, because the kids love it, because of all the animals. But I'm like, this was like per capita the most violent event in human history. Like, we don't know how many people died, but thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, like, all dead. we don't talk about like the corpses that must have just been floating, decomposing. No, like, we talk about how the furry animals got on the ark and everyone was safe, and then there was a rainbow, and I'm like, man, this is, like, when my girls are in like middle school, when I feel like they're old enough to handle it, I'm going to be like, we are revisiting this story. We are going to think about what it was like.
My kid has this Bible app that we do, and it tells the stories, and they're animated. It's really cute, and it goes through Moses, pleading with Pharaoh to let the people go and all the plagues, and he's like, but why is there blood in the water? And then all the baby boys die, and it's kind of like, I mean, they talk about it, but it's just kind of like a little bit like smoothed over, and then this happened, on to the next page. So reading through the Old Testament, I mean, it's just full of a lot of stuff that we don't put in children's Bible apps.
Yeah, I guess it did. Evie, when she heard the story of Moses, but she didn't have as big of a reaction as I thought she was going to, when she was like, they were killing the babies, and I was like, yeah, they were killing the babies, and so I was like gearing up for her to be totally freaked out, but it made her sad, but she didn't freak out as bad as I thought she was going to. Sometimes I think because we live when we live and where we live, and we're so civilized that I expect my kids to freak out over like life and death anytime they have to face it, because I feel like, oh, children just don't know how to handle those things. And then like when they do, it makes them sad, but they handle it. And I'm like, oh yeah, for most of human history, like a lot of kids had to see like battles and fighting and starvation and Right.
And I think if I had more time, I'd love to take some good like Bible classes or things like that that explain more of the historical background and cultural background, because I think there's just so much of the Bible that we, as Westerners miss because we see it through our own lens, and we don't see it through the lens of how it really actually happened and how different the world was then. So I think, even when we're just discussing, the stories, which that's the part I think that like, I totally picture like the flannel graph and
Yeah.
and I think that's almost more the downside that for my child, because it makes it seem like they're just stories, like a book on the shelf versus something happened and it's really alive. And so I think that's more the struggle for me, is like, how do I explain that there's a God who created us, who loves us, but you can't see him, but he's here, and that Jesus is in my heart, but not really inside of me? Because he asked me one time, like, but how is Jesus in there? Like, how do you get him out? And all of that kind of stuff. Like, how do you explain that kind of stuff to a toddler? And yet I want to. I want him to grasp as much as he can, but that's kind of more my struggle, I think, personally.
Dixie asked my grandma one time if Jesus drinks the blood, because she thought Jesus was in her heart and she knew her heart pumped blood. So she asked, because my grandma told her that Jesus was in her heart, and she was like, "Does he drink the blood?" And she was like, I had to explain to her, like, that's not what we mean. There isn't like a tiny little Jesus man. Like, yeah. And honestly, especially because Evie really does, Dixie's like a little animal. She doesn't really spend a lot of time thinking about things, but Evie does. And so it actually did already make me a little bit nervous, but it was inevitable when she started asking me questions about how, like, we can't see God, and why doesn't he want to talk to us, and why doesn't he want us to see him? And then at one point she did tell me, like, it's hard to believe in God. And I was like, it is. Like, it is hard to believe it, especially when you don't go outside a lot. Like, when you're surrounded just by things that other humans made. And it did make me kind of sad for her, because it made me feel like I understand what her life is going to be like, because for some people it's so natural, and for other people it is, but it isn't. And I think she's going to be one of those people where it is, but it isn't. But sometimes that makes you a lot more compassionate towards, atheists. So we need people like that too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Really? Do you have any song lyrics that remind you of motherhood?
You know what? I probably could think of a lot more, but the first song that popped in my head, there's a Nicole Nordman song called "Slow Down" that I can't really listen to, or I immediately start crying.
Aww.
Listen to it. It's just about her kid growing up too fast, and she wants her kid to slow down, and it pulls at the heartstrings.
Are you guys gonna have 4 more?
Yeah. Back to you on that one.
Oh my goodness. I think we're going to probably call it good.
Yeah, I have 2 hands, and right now I feel like, I'm usually, treading water at the end of the day. So we'll see.
That was all my questions. Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
Nothing that's popping in my head. But I read your question ahead of time, so I kind of feel like I studied for the test.
Oh my goodness. Oh man.
Though, we should just do this for fun when we're not recording.
Yeah, then you won't have to be nervous.
Yeah.
But I will judge you if you give the wrong answers.
As you should.
Oh my goodness. It did make me laugh when you said that about being an introvert, though. Mostly, like, my childhood memories of being at church was just racing around the entire building trying to keep up with you.
Yeah. There were so many and things going on. Yeah. I had to figure it all out, I guess. I don't know. And I'm so not that way now. Well, actually, that's not true. I am always racing around church, but usually now I'm chasing children.
Yeah.
So.
Were you always like that at school too? Did your friends at school have to race to keep up with you there too? Were you just everywhere?
Way different at school than I was at church. I think I was a lot more comfortable at church. I think that was
really?
where I could really be myself, and I didn't really feel that way at school as much. So, yeah.
Do you think any of that came from being a PK and just the fact that you were actually at that building a lot?
Maybe, but the buildings kept changing. I think
that's true.
It's unique, I was telling Brian, I think it's probably a really good thing that we my dad was a pastor for like 35 years at that church, so my entire life. And I think that was a huge benefit for us, not like screwing us up. You know, you hear all this crazy stuff about PKs, and for us, it was just like, well, we went to the same church with the same people, and everybody was like family, and, you know, they were telling you not to run in church and obey them and all that kind of stuff. And it was just natural and normal. And, you hear stories about like being under the magnifying glass or whatever, and I didn't really ever feel it. I felt like everybody else, or I thought they felt at least. So, and I hope my kids feel that way too, you know, like that everybody's like family, but, that they're not.
You know, the number one thing that like scandalizes me about other people's children in public, because I just don't understand it, is when other people's kids don't listen to other adults. Because I can remember when I was, and I don't remember my mom ever like verbally teaching us this, but I remember when I was a little kid, if I got scolded by my mom, I might be in trouble. If my mom found out another adult at church had to scold me, I was in so much trouble. And so I was scared of adults, that like other adults, because like they were the ones that were really going to get me in trouble. So if I'm in the store or something and like a kid, the other day I was at McDonald's and this other kid, this little kid crawled under our table at McDonald's. And so I leaned down there and I was like, kid, like you got to come out from under the table. And he just stared at me. And I was like, I don't understand. Like when I was little, I would have been like petrified of like another adult scolding me, but I don't, because you felt the same way, right? When you were at church?
Yeah, but I think that, I don't know, I felt there was consequences, like,
yeah.
And I mean, of course there was like always the crazy, adult that like told you stuff and you were like, wait, what? But for the most part, I always felt like I had multiple parents at church. There were people always watching me. So if my parents, my dad was always on stage preaching, but there were always other people watching me during the service. So, we couldn't get away with anything, which was fine. I didn't really ever feel like I needed to get away with anything. But, now it's definitely different nowadays, I think. I don't know. And I don't know where the balance is. I don't want that to be my kid. I want my kid to like, be respectful and of other adults.
I hope my kids are. I hope so. I don't know. Yeah. At least my kids don't climb under other people. Well, I don't know. I wouldn't put past Dixie to climb underneath somebody else's table in McDonald's, but I mean, we'd be grabbing her. We'd be horse collaring her. Come here, kid.
The pew last week, which I mean, I don't really have a huge problem with if he wants to lay down during the service, that's fine. But the lady sitting on the other side was sitting there, and I didn't want him bugging her, and she was wearing a dress, so I didn't want him to like, be a creeper or anything. So, but trying to explain to a 3-year-old that he can go under the other bench just fine, but not that bench, and trying to whisper what wasn't happening, so it turned into a little bit of a fit, and he had to be taken out for a few minutes. But I don't know, growing problems. I don't know. I think when they get a little bit older, thankfully, I don't think they really remember a ton from these early ages. So Paul figured this all out when he was, 5 and older.
I probably remember like 2 things from before preschool. I don't remember like anything.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I don't know. That's probably a blessing because I think that's when the parents are figuring everything out anyway. So.
Yeah. Man.
That I have happy childhood memories. She apologizes for stuff and I'm like, no, we had great childhood and I don't feel scarred. I don't need to go talk to a counselor about my childhood stuff.
Your mom apologizes for stuff?
Well, just I think it's mom guilt. I don't think it ever goes away. She'll apologize for the Kool-Aid that she used to give us, because it wasn't like the most organic stuff. I don't know. I think we're good though. So you need to put, if you guys make a will, you need to put in your will right now that someday when you die, even like if it's when you're 105, they put on your gravestone, it was probably the Kool-Aid. Yeah. That's what it was, the cheap Kool-Aid. That's what she could have lived another decade if she hadn't drank that cheap Kool-Aid. We used to buy cheap Kool-Aid and then freeze it into popsicles and then eat them. Oh man. Yeah. It's a little bit sad that we now know better because stuff that I got to eat as a child way better than the stuff I feed my kids. Here, you get one chocolate covered banana. It's like a slice of banana. It's one slice. It's not even a whole. one slice of banana with chocolate on it. It's like dark chocolate, and I'm sure it's probably organic. I don't know. We got it at Costco, but and I'm like, yay for you. So really
That's funny.
yeah.
All right. Thank you for coming on. I probably have to go to bed because I usually go to bed at like 9 because I get up really early. But it is nice to talk to you. And you're so pretty.
Oh, thank you. I guess that's because, you know, I knew I was going to be on YouTube.
I had to go redo my eyeliner. I was like, oh, it's like 8:45 at night. What am I doing this for?